welcome to you all. My name is Antje Fiedler and I'm an associate editor of the Journal of Small Business Management. I'm very grateful today for the opportunity to talk with Kaushik Gala about his paper titled Acquihires by SMEs as a Strategic Response to Industry Digitization. The paper has been published online November 2022 in the Journal of Small Business Management. It was co-authored by his advisor and colleague, Associate Professor Brendan Mueller. Both work at the Department of Management and Entrepreneurship, Ivy College of Business, Iowa State University in the United States. Welcome, Kaushik.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about your paper. The first question I have for you is, where did the idea came from?
Yeah, so, I was looking at, the mergers and acquisitions literature as part of a seminar that I took as a PhD student here at Iowa State. And one of the things that we often discussed was how, often the mergers and acquisitions don't always result in the economic value that was anticipated. And then we used to discuss about reasons around, things like CEO overconfidence or post-integration issues and so on. And as part of that seminar, we also talked about some contexts or situations where the acquisitions actually do create value. So that got me thinking about, well, are there types of acquisitions that are more likely to create a value that was promised early? And the other thing that I also noticed is that a lot of times the media and in the research, we talk about these large acquisitions of public firms by other public firms. But in fact, a lot of acquisitions actually happen on the smaller end. I think the median exit is of the order of maybe $5 or $10 million, whereas usually we read about these billion-dollar acquisitions. And so that kind of led to this idea of, okay, maybe we should look at these smaller acquisitions and especially acquihires. And an acquihire is a specific term for when a small startup is acquired by a larger firm, specifically for the talent and some of the intellectual property that the startup brings. And of course, this comes more from the technology Silicon Valley world, where there are a whole bunch of technology startups, but not all of them go on to become billion-dollar companies. But the others that don't succeed are still valuable because they have great talent and technology that they have developed. So the acquisition of those companies is acquihiring, and it seemed like a specific type of acquisition which was worth looking into.
Fascinating and such a practical relevance. But I also would like to know a bit, what are the most important theoretical implications of that research?
Yeah, so, again, sort of thinking back in terms of, okay, where might acquihires be more relevant? So one connection that we came up with was, we read about all these big technology companies going into traditional industry. So for example, we read about Airbnb disrupting the hotel industry or Amazon disrupting the warehouse industry. And so the thought occurred to us that maybe when we look at these traditional industries which are being disrupted by digitalization, that may be an interesting context where those companies, instead of being disrupted, can look at acquihires as a means to compete against these new technology-driven companies. And so that started leading us to, okay, maybe there are things that we need to look at in terms of pre-acquihire and post-acquihire, which can help these firms in traditional industries overcome some of the typical M&A challenges. So for example, one of the challenge has been post-acquisition integration, where social, cultural, or functional fit causes the expected value to not pan out. And so we explored those things, in terms of who, what, when, why of acquihires. And the other thing we realized is that it's probably the SMEs in the traditional industries and not the large firms that are better candidates as buyers, because for them to compete against a technology company is very difficult. They don't necessarily have in-house R&D teams. So it seemed like a natural, thought that acquihires would be more suited for SMEs in traditional industries that are getting disrupted by digitalization.
Fascinating. So in terms of practical implications, what advice would you give to practitioners and policymakers?
Sure, yeah. So, practitioners, as I said, if you're looking at traditional industries and the, CXOs of small and medium-sized enterprises in those, certainly it would make sense for them to keep an eye on the technology industry, and especially where it is in the cycle. So if we think of, AI or blockchain, I mean, whenever such big technologies come out, there is a hype, and then there is a bit of a downturn. And that's really where, things get weeded out, the technology becomes more stable, there are business use cases for those. And so, CXOs of SMEs can start looking at that timing and say, okay, this is the time when there are enough startups out there, the technology seems to be maturing, I can acquire it. And at the same time, hopefully they're not going to pay a premium, which has been found to, be a predictor of poor M&A outcomes. The other would be, what stage of a company should you be acquiring, right? So you want, these acquihires, if they have, let's say, raised multiple rounds of funding from venture capitalists, that's going to be difficult because those investors are expecting much bigger exits. Whereas if these acquihires are small, they only have maybe angel investors, then it may be a win-win both for the founders and angel investors as the seller and also the SMEs as the buyer. So, considerations of timing, the maturity of the venture, the maturity of the technology, those are the things that, we would think practitioners should look out for. The other thing, of course, is post-acquisition integration, because when you're hiring, when you're acqui-hiring, you're getting essentially founders. And you need to put a lot of energy in making sure that the founders are going to retain with you as the SME so that the integration can pan out as expected. And for policymakers, what we think is, imagine there's a traditional industry which is getting disrupted and it's declining, and there's job loss in a certain region. This might be a way to rejuvenate that industry by supporting acqui-hiring and bringing in that technical talent into a traditional industry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing these implications.
Thank you so much for inviting.
It's very valuable for us. Are there any other thoughts you have?
Yeah, I think the last thought I have is, whatever I spoke right now is more from the buyer's side. But I would also, think that the seller's perspective is interesting, that you have these founders and a lot of them, for example, especially in an acquiring context, their ventures did not work out as expected. And so their motivations to exit, whether it's financial or you're, wanting to become a serial entrepreneur and try something different, those are also important to be factored in this context.
Kaushik, thank you so much to share your research and also a bit about the future research that you might conduct. I think that everyone wants to read the full version of your paper, which is available at the Taylor & Francis website of the Journal of Small Business Management. And yeah, it was really lovely to hear about your research. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.